Oh, you are actually streaming? That's crazy.
I think so,
So
that's
that's
true.
connection. Huh?
but almost obvious. Alright.
I can barely see anything, Vogue.
You happen now?
Wait, we're actually streaming this? Why were we streaming this?
You said you wanted to stream this.
No.
Whatever, we're going at it right now.
in the US is 2.9 out of 5, which isn't failing, but pretty damn close to it. And research shows that those who earn the most money actually scored lower on intelligence than those who earned less than them. Meaning getting rich nowadays isn't about being smart, and instead it comes down to
Comes down to what?
I don't know, creativity.
Alright.
these three things. Number one, have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's a psychological bias where people who know very little about a subject often think that they know more than they do. So if you think about it,
Does that happen to you?
Sure, what we
do you consider yourself an above average driver? I bet you tree 50 that you said yes, and studies show exactly that, right?
But how could you be above average if you never driven against other people?
Wait, stop it every 5
Americans
seconds.
rate themselves
Just
better than
let the
average at
video
driving,
go,
which is
Blake.
statistically impossible.
Didn't you tell me you have to stop every so often?
I didn't know you were going
We
to
can't all be
that.
above
Only
average
like
at driving,
20,
but
10,
that's
30
basically the
seconds.
Dunning-Kruger effect in
you have a
action.
timer for
Our
me?
brain works very
Go ahead.
hard to convince ourselves that we are more competent than we are. And the irony is that the more quote-unquote dumb someone is, the more they think they can succeed in what they do. You get more confident.
So, do you get more confident in whatever you do?
No, not even close, but okay.
You sure?
Yeah,
And then all of a
the
sudden
more
they
dumb
think they can
things I
start a
do,
YouTube
no,
channel about personal finance, grow it into a media business, helping millions of people every month make smarter money moves, and before you know it, you're doing it. That's me. On the other hand, for most smart people, the moment you even consider starting a big endeavor like this,
What do you think he's gonna say next?
I don't know. What the freak?
He's obviously gonna say that most smart people overthink because intellect will cap you up at a certain point because thinking that you're smart will make you overthink about something. Duh.
Yeah.
you're gonna start researching, right? With 316 tabs open where you try to analyze every possible approach for weeks, and then you never actually start anything, aka analysis
What I say? That's what I thought.
paralysis. And it happens when you spend too much time thinking about doing something, which just paralyzes you from making
In other words, just do it like the Nike logo, okay?
actual progress in doing that thing. The point is, dumb people often don't know what they don't know, so they get more confident and they believe in themselves, right? That they
Where you going? We're streaming, buddy.
Yeah, we're streaming, buddy.
Whatever. I'll
can
lose
actually
myself.
succeed, so they actually start and take the first step. But most people, they want to make sure that they have all the information first, right? They want to have the best strategy and the best plan, and then they overthink and they second guess themselves and end up not doing anything. Which brings me to the second reason that prevents smart people from getting rich, and it's that you have the wrong understanding of risk. And this is something that I've seen firsthand.
The wrong understanding of risk? Does that mean that you're willing to risk too much for too little reward? Or that you're not willing to risk at all for any reward?
And because I kind of lived on both sides. My first job out of college was in finance, and I'd say 90% of my coworkers, right? 90% of them went to Ivy League colleges. They were top of their class. They were very academically smart people. And whenever we talked about how much our job sucked or how much we hated them, and then we would like plan when we'll quit and start our own company, nearly all of them would agree with me, and they'd say, "Yeah, I'm down." And then we spend hours talking about entrepreneurship and our business ideas and yada yada. And this isn't like a one-time conversation, right? This would span across multiple weeks. And what really blows my mind is that I will check in again with them later, like a month or 2 months later, and then I'll find out that they haven't done anything to try and reach their goals, despite all the conversations we literally just had. And now that
In other words, a lot of people like talking about doing things, but they don't even try or attempt to do or complete them. Simply because all it was, and at the end of the day, it was just talk. Because they're scared of taking the risk of doing something, creating something, advancing and stuff, because they're not certain of how to do it yet. See, if you believe in yourself, honestly believe in yourself, the only way to create that type of belief is to do it. You know what I'm saying?
I've been in this entrepreneurship space for a few years now and meeting really cool people, ranging from someone just starting a new business to someone who raised tens of millions of dollars. I would always notice that a lot of them either never went to college, or if they did, they went to less well-known schools. And it's not just my experience. Research actually found that people...
The reason why is because when you go to college, you go to a place where it's already organized for you. In other words, organization doesn't allow you to think out the box. If you're allowed to think out the box, it allows you to advance for yourself and by yourself. So it allows you to lead your own life the proper way. In other words, if you could lead your own life, you could lead your own career, you could lead other people, and you could create a business and lead your own business. I believe that's what it means.
People with higher cognitive scores were more willing to take risk in a controlled environment, but when real money was involved and was on the line, that boldness pretty much disappeared. And if you really think about it, it kind of makes sense.
It does make sense, he's right. If you're in a controlled environment, it's easy to take risks. So for example, if you go on, an investing app like Robinhood, I have Robinhood, that's why I mentioned it. There's a certain, there's this gameplay version of money. So you pretend to have like $1 million and you play with the option trading. You trade the options and then you tend to make money in the game. But then when you go to real life with your own money, your own capital, and trade the option to make some money, there's a high chance you'll lose money, there's a high chance you'll make money. But sometimes you get scared and you don't even try it. So at the end of the day, you can't make nor lose money, but you're still spending money. Therefore, real life risk doesn't mean, game risk doesn't equate to real life risk. You're not willing to risk it in real life is what I'm trying to say.
Because back in the day, when we were hunters and gatherers in the wild, it was the smart people who were the ones that survived, right? If you heard some noise in the bushes, in the grass, it was the smart hunters who would be like, oh shit, that's scary AF, let's get out of here. Whereas it was the less than smart hunters who decided to stay and get eaten alive. So over time, the people who survived were people who overestimated their risk and kind of imagined the worst case scenario. And if we fast forward to modern times, right, the smart people are still instinctually conditioned to take on...
Actually, technically that ain't true, simply because, I don't know if y'all know about the story about the bear and the 4 high school or college students. I don't know what they were. But there were 4 wrestlers, right? High school or college, one of the above. But they're 4 males. They wrestled a bear and were able to beat it. Of course, they got scratched, hurt, and everything. But if they decided to run in that occasion, they would have died 100% certain. But since all 4 of them ganged up on the bear, they decided to fight the bear. Instead of dying at the hands of the bear, they were able to escape. Simply meaning, if you're willing to take the risk, even though the risk is high, real life risk, a bear, fighting a bear. I'm not sure how they took it down, but they did explain that. They did take it down. It was on the news. If you don't believe me, search it up. 3 high school students or college students versus a bear. Search it up. Legit. If you're willing to take risk, you can succeed. But you have to believe in yourself. This is the most important part.
On fewer risks and kind of follow the safe traditional path. But the difference is, nowadays, taking on a risk that isn't illegal isn't that serious, right? Maybe you'll lose some money, maybe you'll lose some time, but you're not gonna die, you're not gonna get eaten by a lion. But still, the fear of some risk is enough for most smart people to kind of stay on the safe path. The point is...
That's true. For example, in dating, a lot of guys get scared for this new modern day. For example, when the girls are recording themselves and stuff like that, they're scared they're going to be on the internet and stuff like that. So they don't even approach or talk to them. See? Fear, light fear, it's not that crazy amount of fear. But just having that amount of fear will stop you from doing what you want to do.
Dumb people tend to underestimate the risk, whereas smart people tend to overestimate it and then follow the conventional route. But if you want to get rich, you can't follow conventional wisdom and expect to get non-conventional results, which is what...
That's true. Just look at Henry Ford. Henry Ford was technically a crazy person because he was willing to put so much work and effort into his company to produce it, make more money. In case y'all don't know about Henry Ford, at first he was poor. He became an accountant to make money, right? He wanted to be in control of money. And in doing so, he bought out the business out of his partner and then made more money. But he was crazy enough and willing enough to take the risk to expand and get bigger. His partner, on the other hand, said, "Nah, we can't expand. We're too not making enough money." Blah blah blah. His fear stopped him from seeing the bigger future and become rich. See, Henry Ford eventually bought the railroad companies, etc., gas things, etc. That allowed him to produce way more money, make way more profits, and become a massive big empire, like the Ford company. I think that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I'm talking about. All right, let's continue.
Why today's sponsor, Relay, has been such a game changer.
Hold up. Let me skip this part. Jump ahead.
Play with the link in the description below. The next reason why dumb people make more money than you is that smart people are scared of looking stupid. And this is something I've noticed actually happen.
You know, the funny thing is, inherently, we are not born with fear because children aren't really scared. That's why if you listen to the child, they'll tell you straight up if you look old, you look ugly, etc. It doesn't matter to the child. If they like you, they'll tell you they like you. The child is not born with fear. Fear is a concept constructed and created over time because you failed and you felt embarrassed and you felt shame over something. See, fear is a limiting factor, but fear also allows you to push yourself and get better. But you must know how to use it properly.
It's hot for people who go through life being labeled the smart kid. Growing up for me, I was never considered the smart kid in my class, but I had a lot of smart friends, probably because I looked like I was a smart nerd. But that was a catfish. People who grow up being the smart kid, they get a lot of external validation from it, right? And it kind of becomes this new identity. And when your self-image is built on being intelligent or being always right, then the thought of starting a business and failing.
You know how you mentioned external validation? See, that's why a lot of models, a lot of like famous people, very good looking people, they tend to have a fear of falling out, like it says right here. Fear of looking negative in another person's eyes. So they don't really like to go out and show them true selves, if you know what I mean.
Publicly, it's kind of scary and is, in a way, pretty much just all downhill. In fact, studies show that kids who were praised for being smart were more likely to avoid challenging tasks because they were afraid of failing. Which is kind of ironic because if you're smart, you should always want to improve as a person, and you don't really get better when things are easy. It's basically like when you're lifting weights, right? If you lift a half a pound dumbbell, you can move your arm up and down as much as you want, but you're not actually going to build any new muscle. On the other hand, people who didn't grow up being the smart kid.
Oh, technically that's not true. As long as you work the muscle will grow. See, he didn't understand the concept of volume for muscle growth. That's different. He wasn't talking about that, but let's say he was right. For example.
In class, like me, I was pretty average. You don't carry this type of baggage and burden around. And people tend to underestimate and think that you're never going to achieve much anyway. And this does too.
Yeah, that is kind of funny because like fairly average height, and for basketball, I love to play basketball. But like everybody, when they saw me on the court waiting to get in a game, they wouldn't pick me because they thought I was trash at basketball. But then once I got on court, I was smoking them. It was hilarious. They couldn't keep up, or they couldn't jump high enough. They couldn't block me, etc. So I looked like I couldn't play ball because I was short. Well, compared to an NBA player, but technically average height. But since I was average, they underestimated me, like you said. Instead, they should have overestimated me. And then they would have tried a bit harder.
Very interesting things, right? So number one, it kind of motivates you because it makes you want to prove everyone else wrong. And number two, you technically have less to prove and less to lose, so it's all upside from here. So keeping all these...
That's true. That's why if you hit rock bottom, you technically have literally nothing to lose. If you have nothing to lose, you're willing to do anything. You'll literally be able to rob a bank, technically speaking. That's why the people are so down and bad that need money, they rob a bank, even though nowadays I'm pretty sure that won't even work. But let's get back into the video.
Reasons in mind, right? What are some things you can do if you're smart and you want to get rich and not get left behind? Number one is you need to embrace a B+ mentality. Let's say there are two people at the bottom of the mountain, right? A smart person and a dumb person.
B+ mentality. Honestly, I've never heard this term. I thought I thought I knew stuff, but I guess I don't.
Before taking even a single step, the smart person is going to sit down, take out a map, weather instruments, climbing manuals, the whole shebang. Meanwhile, the dumb person is just going to start climbing, right? Maybe he goes the wrong way. Maybe he's going to make a mistake. Maybe he slips a few times.
You know what's kind of funny about this? So, I think a couple years ago, let's say a year ago, I was driving. I went somewhere and I did something. And I was like, you know what? I don't need Google Maps. I'm pretty sure I can get home from here. I was driving for like 30 or 40 minutes. I'm like, damn, what the freak am I? So then I decided to use Google Maps. So I guess I must be the dumb person. That's funny.
But every time he messes up, he's gonna get back up, he's gonna keep on going. At the end, even though the dumb person messed up a lot, right? He's the first one to make it to the top. While the smart person is still at the bottom, making sure he's wearing the right hiking boots. If you want to get rich, you need to stop trying to always do A+ work and be okay with doing it.
In other words, what he's trying to say is you must be okay with the product itself, for example, what I'm doing right now, not being its best possible condition. You must be willing to put the work consistently and willing to keep on going even if you fail. Get back up like he said earlier in the video. And you'll finish. As long as you finish, you're good. It doesn't need to be perfect.
B+ work. Mistakes are a part of life, and oftentimes they are the best ways to learn something, right? And to be honest, there's a really solid chance that what you consider B+ work is actually pretty damn good already. Very quick, 3 books that I found really helpful for me when I'm in a slump or when I'm in analysis paralysis is The Practice, Show Your Work, and Getting Things Done. The point is, at some point, perfection is just another fancy word for procrastination, right? You don't get any better by thinking about it.
That is true. See, a lot of times when I was younger, I tried to perfect something, and I was just redoing my work over and over again. For example, essays, right? In English class, when you're doing the essays and they tell you to revise your thesis and improve it. I remember my best work, honestly, was done. The second time I revised it, or the first time I revised it, technically speaking, and it was basically perfect. And I tried to revise it multiple times because my English teacher told me to do multiple revisions. And honestly, he said, "Hey, come here. Did you even revise this?" I told him, "Yeah, I did. I was working on it. I revised like 4 or 5 times like you told me to." And he said, "I don't see no difference." See, like he says, perfection, trying to improve it again and again and again, will not produce the very best outcome. See, doing it somewhat good, somewhat at the best effort that you can at the time, actually most likely will produce a way better outcome.
About doing something, you get better by doing it. And each imperfect action that you take teaches you something that you couldn't have learned otherwise, right? And all these like small improvements eventually compound into expertise and success. Number 2.
Exactly how a baby learns how to walk, then learns how to run. They practice, they fall, and they get back up, keep on practicing. Simple.
Find and use your comparative advantage. Now, I know this is going in a little bit of a different direction, but the truth is, not everyone should be an entrepreneur. What I've noticed is that it takes a very specific personality, but that still doesn't mean that you can't get rich not being an entrepreneur. Part of financial success is finding out what you can do better than the average person.
Yeah, for example, people that get rich technically don't know everything. Okay? We need to understand that. The people that get rich and are smart with getting rich don't need to know everything. See, Henry Ford got sued back in the day, right? Because he didn't know about certain things, right? And then in the courtroom, he answered and said, this is exactly what he said, but I'm rephrasing it to what my memory is, to what I can remember. He said, okay, the judge asked him, "Okay, Henry, so tell me, Henry, do you know how to do this, that, and that? And if you don't, why are you doing it?" And then Henry Ford said simply, in simple terms, he said, "Okay, I am not an expert in these fields," right? That is correct. You already know that. But the thing is, I can hire an expertise and they can do the job for me. See, I can hire a lawyer and they can fight the case for me. Okay? I can hire a carpenter, a house builder, a road or pavement builder, and they can build the road for me. They can build the house for me. I can hire an engineer and they can construct the stuff for me. It's basically the exact same thing Elon Musk is doing. See, he hired the correct people, the smart people, to do the job for him. See, the thing is, he was smart enough to collect the correct group of people to get the work done that he wanted. See, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be smart enough to get the people to work for you.
Or better than most people, and really focusing on doing that thing. For example, a really talented plumber who's well known throughout the city, right? He can earn way more money than a lawyer who is terrible at his job. And sometimes it can be really tough to find out what you're good at if you've been doing something else for a very long time. But the easiest way to find that out is, one, you can check out Gallup's Clifton Strengths Assessment or VIA's Character Strength Assessment. Both of these assessments are pretty comprehensive and the results are pretty eye-opening. The point is, if you go down a career path that doesn't align with your strengths, and you do it just because you feel like you're supposed to do it,
Or because it pays the bills.
because of prestige, of stability, or money, then you're going to underperform compared to other people, and you're never going to reach your full potential. The next
Well, it depends on the person, because certain people will still overperform even if they don't like the field. See, performance depends on the person. Because if you're disciplined enough to just perform even if you don't like something, a lot of people do that. A lot older people do that. They overwork themselves. They've done the stuff necessary to make money, even though they don't like it.
next tip is to avoid the heavier weight. And this is something that really helped me make the leap from corporate America to starting my own business. And it's realizing that no matter which of the two choices I made, right, it's gonna suck. For example, I hated my job, right? And I felt like I was going nowhere. And if I stayed, then I would experience the pain of staying where I was. On the other hand, if I left and I did my own thing, right, I would experience the pain of going into the unknown and potentially failing and looking stupid or getting judged from my friends and family. So I had two choices, and either choice would lead to some sort of pain. So how did I figure out which choice to choose? For me, what I did is I tried to imagine my life in 5, 10, 15 years from now and look at it and see which pain would hurt the most.
So we decided between two pains. Which pain was the better pain to go through? If you're willing to put in the work, willing to put the effort in, you'll choose the harder pain. Or, well, technically, the easier pain, because in the end, you will be rewarded. The harder pain in reality is the consistent and the normal job, because you won't get rewarded. You know what I'm saying?
I realized that the pain of staying where I was and not doing anything, that pain was far greater, would be far greater for me than if I forced myself to get out of my comfort zone and take the job. The point is, even if you have the tiniest inkling of wanting to do more, give it a try. Because the absolute worst thing that can happen is you fail and then you end up in the same exact spot that you are in right now.
Oh, it's not bad.
This is Ronald Reed. After he died in June 2014,